Hello everyone, I'm Steve Egan, the Director of Global Solutions Engineering with Nebo. I've been with its parent company Datamere for about 8 years now. Great turnout. You know, one time I had a session, I was right across from happy hour when it just started and I had about 5 people, so very good, thank you. So the way I'll structure this is I've got about 5 slides, give you a little background on what Nebo is, what it does, and then I'll spend most of the time on a live demo. And seeing the product in action. So what we're seeing today at various organizations is a greater number of questions, right, that management has of analysts. And the questions are ever changing. Thank you. The questions are ever changing. And then analytics is a very iterative process. So when you ask a question and get an answer, it just generates 4 or 5 more questions. So this is a challenge because there can be, you know, a variety of data sources, a variety of tools in play. And what Nebo aims to do is to make that turnaround time much faster between the time that you ask a question and the time that you get an answer. So again, here's some of the challenges that we're facing. If a question's asked, we're seeing on average, you know, it takes about 4 or 5 days to produce a new report. So really what we want is the answers back within, you know, hours, maybe a half a day. And I'll show an example of asking a few questions and getting some answers pretty quickly. And then again, data is often distributed across data sources, across databases, file shares, web services, making it challenging to bring it all together and use tools like Tableau to do your analysis. And then collaboration. So we see a lot of silos, analysts kind of in their own world. Maybe one of them does something and, you know, other members of the team is difficult for them to collaborate and reuse assets, reuse data sets, reuse connections to databases and so forth. So what Nebo aims to do, I'm calling it a virtual analytics hub. What is a virtual analytics hub? We'll find out. So what we enable you to do is to connect to any data source. Again, on-premise, whether it's any kind of database, cloud-based data warehouse, you know, cloud-based web service, Salesforce, Marketo, Google Analytics, even data on your desktop, right? We probably all have relevant data sets on our desktop that are very siloed there. So Nebo enables, you know, us to bring those into the picture and share them. And we allow you to, you know, discover assets on the fly and then, you know, publish to really any BI tool. Of course, we're going to talk about Tableau a lot today and show you the integration there. We'll also use Excel to do a little bit of analysis. But again, keep in mind, it's really any BI tool, I can even write code and connect to Nebo. So it has a nice standard interface where anybody can get to it. And then we really allow that collaboration. So multiple members of the team kind of working on the same use case to work together, share assets, and get to that endpoint of the answers to the questions much faster. This is kind of a high-level overview, architecture, sort of, on what Nebo does. So on the top, you'll see most of the variety of tools, some of the tools that may be out there that are in use, Tableau, Excel, and many other tools. Data science tools like Jupyter, Zeppelin, you know, all data scientists can talk about is Python, so you could certainly use Python to connect to Nebo. So kind of the bridge between all of those tools and then all of your data sources, like your databases, file shares, data on your desktop, cloud-based sources, and where we allow that virtual access layer between those. So first we build an inventory of your assets so that you know, we build a centralized place where you can go in and search for data sets and find them and add them to your sort of data space. Again, across data sources, so having one place to go. We allow you to do sort of your last mile data preparation operations that's most common to BI users and data scientists. Doing things like blending, splitting, replacing, things like that, things of that sort. And then allowing, again, the collaboration between different members of the team, and it's all virtual. So I don't need to create a data warehouse, do ETL, create schemas. It's all virtual on the fly, and it's geared towards the end users. So you'll see the product. Hopefully it's, you know, easy enough where analysts can just come in and use it directly without necessarily involving, IT for every task. So given that, we'll go ahead and jump into the demo, and we'll talk about consumer packaged goods data. So supermarket transactions. This data is often distributed across data sources. So I may have some transactions that exist in an S3 bucket as Parquet files. I may have some product data sets that exist in a data warehouse. I may want to correlate in data from an external web service like weather, see how weather affects transactions, and that leads to my questions. So the questions I'm going to ask and answer today in just 15 minutes maybe is, how does temperature affect overall consumer spending? And what brands are purchased when it's rainy versus sunny out, right? Which ones are purchased more often? So this could be valid questions that management may ask. Maybe there's a big storm coming to the supermarket and they want the answers right away so that they can adjust their marketing and brand placement accordingly within the store. So given this, we'll go ahead and jump into Nebo, and this is what I might first see when I log in. So central to Nebo is really the data spaces and data sets that I've already got, that analysts are already using and collaborating around. And so I could see that here in the middle, and they could be individual data sets or what we call a data space, which is a term that refers to sort of a collection of artifacts that all revolve around a single use case. And I could see, maybe ones that are trending and we have the ability to follow them. So I can see, maybe recently used ones, just helping me find relevant data sets to what I'm doing. I can also search across assets. So I'm going to search for grocery because that's what I'm interested in. Maybe somebody tagged their data space. And when I search, I do find one data space. It looks like it has 3 followers and a couple of tags here. And I can drill into that. And I can see on the right here, I've got a couple analysts that have used this and have collaborated around it. I can see all the collaborators on the project. We have a fine-grained security model where I can add in different members of the team to access what I do and the tags that they've added. And central to here is kind of the data flow and what's going on. So here I've got a couple of views set up. The data remains in place. It remains in the data warehouse. It remains in S3, whatever the system of record is. That's Nebo now. We're just virtualizing and make it easy for you to access those data sources. So this is a view to a set of files, transactions in S3. And stores is a view to a database table that may be on-premise, could be a Snowflake table. At this point, that's all sort of abstracted from me as the end user. I just know their data sets, don't really care where they are. And I can go and it looks like they've done sort of a combine here. And I can go into this workbench to explore the data set a bit. And so what we do is we profile the data and we show you how it's distributed, a little representative snippet of the data. And I could see, yes, they did do sort of a blend on these 2 data sets and they are combining transactions to store. So the first thing I might do is create my own view on top of that, because I'm going to build out my own use case. Remember, I have my own questions to answer. So I'm going to make my own view called transaction product and think of this as my own kind of sandbox. I can do what I need to do. And I can also explore what they've done further in Tableau. So when I do that, what it does is it downloads a TDS file, and that sets up a live connection in Tableau to Nebo. So Tableau is actually querying Nebo. It thinks it's a data warehouse, but it's, again, really that virtual layer, but it provides that standard interface where any tool can access it. So it just live queried Nebo, and then these are all the different attributes that I can do my analysis on. Now I'm going to drag up city, and I'm going to drag up the dollar amount that was spent by the transactions. So that's maybe my first initial discovery phase. Okay, I can see I've got a couple stores. I can see, they've rolled up the total spending. But now we have to get to my particular questions. Overall spending by temperature and brands on rainy versus sunny. So that involves the integration of a couple of more data sources. I don't have the assets available to me right now to answer those questions. So I'm going to go back into Nebo and I need products, and that exists in a data warehouse somewhere. So I can go into our inventory of assets, and you can see the different connection types that we've got out here. Our product itself is only 10 months old, so this is going to expand a lot as we go, generally available. But again, I can upload data, I can point to data warehouses, cloud-based sources, Salesforce, Tableau catalog. We've natively integrated with that, so I can read their catalog and use that to set up new connections, right, for Nebo. And if this were a data warehouse, nice simple interface, put it in host port, select my table. But the first time that we connect to a data warehouse, what we do is what we call introspection, and we gather all the tables that are in that data warehouse, not the data itself, just the metadata around the tables, and we add that to the inventory. And if this were a file-based source like an S3 bucket, we'd scan all the files and we would add them into the inventory. So we're always enriching the inventory when we can. And even that combine that I did, or all the use cases that I do, are automatically added back into the inventory, allowing the search and reuse to, again, really get to those answers to those questions a lot faster. And what I'm going to do now is search for product. That searches, and there's my view to my database table, and I'm going to add that view into my workspace here. One other data set to add, I do want to correlate in weather, and I happen to have downloaded some local weather data for those stores. And as we know, half the intellectual capital of companies are oftentimes chaotically distributed across users' desktops. So we have the ability to, again, add entire folders. I can add files. I'm just going to add a single file up to Nebo, and that actually physically copies the data set into Nebo. So if it's an enterprise source like a database or file share or S3 bucket, that's the system of record. But when I add data sets, add files, folders, then we actually copy it into our object store. And I do want to do some blending of products into my transactions. And if I look at this column here, this is what we call a JSON string, something you may have encountered before. They're somewhat difficult to work with without unpacking first. Within this string is my UPC code. So that's what I'm going to use to blend on to bring in my products to get my brand descriptions so that I can see the overall spending. But first I have to unpack that a little bit. So here I'm going to bring up our set of operations. So again, these are the operations that are most common to BI users, data scientists. And I'm going to elect to do an expand on that string there. And I hit apply, and then we automatically turn that string into new columns. Now I've got columns for UPC code. And now I'm going to elect to blend in the products. So to do that, I'm going to select the product data set. And what we do is we go out and scan all the columns and we compare them together and we figure out which ones might be the best ones to blend on. And we give you a score here and we allow you to select it. So it looks like, again, UPC code, that's kind of what we're after. And I can go ahead and create the blend, and that updates my virtual flow here. Again, no data has moved around. It's all just creating virtual pointers and relationships. And I can add in the weather data in there as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and elect to blend in weather. And again, go out, scan, figure out which columns to do. Turns out in weather, it's the date of the weather event with the date of the supermarket transaction. So now I'm just about done. Now I think I can answer that question in Tableau. But before I do that, right now Tableau is going to hit that transaction product, and then Nebo is going to select from stores, transactions, and do this combining and send the results back to Tableau. Well, what if I want to do a lot of queries in Tableau? I don't want to wait for all that to happen. Or maybe one of these is a snowflake table, and I don't want to, they're right over there, so I won't say anything too loud. But what if I want to save costs by caching and hitting my cache? So what I can do is choose to cache this data set. So now Nebo will select the data from all the sources and actually temporarily materialize the data inside of our object store. So it's nice and fast and easily accessible. I can update that cache every so often. We see IT sometimes locking down databases and things like that. Well, this sort of gets around that. Now I have a copy of the data that I can use. And now I can go into Tableau, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh my connection. And what that does is it's going to bring in all those new attributes that I just blended in. So there we go. Now I'm able to answer that question almost. So first what I'll do is I'll change this temperature to a dimension, and then I'm going to drag up the amount of dollars. And then at the bottom there, you'll see the temperature in Celsius. So that's from about 60 degrees or so to 77 degrees. looks like most of our spending is really centered around the 65 to 70 degree range. These stores, if you saw from the graph before, from Southern California, so maybe they think 65 degrees is cold, so it's time to go shopping, you know, versus when it hits 70 out, right, time to go outside and be outside. Anyway, so interesting sort of relationship there with, you know, temperature versus spending. And to get to our second question, it was which brands are purchased more often when it's rainy versus sunny. And for that, it requires you to sort of do some rankings and compare the rankings together. And I just find that is easy to do in a tool like Excel. It's more of a spreadsheet style tool. You know, Excel will always be around, right? After the nuclear wars, Excel and cockroaches will still be here. Nobody's getting rid of it. And you always have those Excel users in your company. So we're going to use Excel to analyze the same data set, but I don't have to, you know, extract the data from these data sources. I don't have to send him my files and he does the blend and all that. No, all I need to do really is add my Excel friend Philip in as a collaborator to this project. And then Philip can then go in to his tool of choice, Excel, and I can just create a live connection here from database. And Nebo is just a standard source for Excel to connect to. I didn't have to do anything special to connect Nebo to Excel. It's just standard, use their standard libraries and drivers. And then I can log in. Again, this is a live connection from Excel to Nebo. And now Excel is going to query Nebo. And these are the views that I just created. Right, so pointing and clicking, did some blending, some unpacking. Now I can view it in any tool, right, including Excel. And now I can select this store data from Nebo and return it into my Excel spreadsheet. And now, what do they always do, right? They always create pivot tables. That's all I can talk about is pivot tables. I've been hearing about those forever. Now I can pivot, you know, on this data. And even more so, since Nebo has an elastic, maybe compute framework, right? We can maybe handle some larger volumes of data sets behind the scenes. We use Spark SQL behind the scenes, but you know, getting into the brands, so I put a couple of queries inside of Excel to Nebo to sort of roll it up by sunny brands. So these were purchased when it was sunny out, and rainy brands, but I couldn't just do like a direct compare because a lot of brands were bought no matter what, right? Because they're just popular brands. So it was very difficult to sort of weed out the noise and find the outliers of which product was brought when it was, you know, a lot more when it was rainy versus sunny. So I did things like rankings. I ranked each one and then I compared them together and then found out the difference. And like I said, this was just easy in Excel. Maybe you can do it in Tableau too. Maybe there's somebody in the audience that really knows how to do this in Tableau and they can show me. But anyway, Excel. But again, the point is, use whatever tool you want, you know, go in and access it. And now we can do some sorts and we can see what brands are purchased more often when it's sunny. So these are the sunny brands. So I've got some ice cream, some orange drinks, some lemonade. So it kind of really did, you know, correlate to the source of data, which is always nice. And then I've got rainy brands in here. So for some reason, people like to snack a lot and eat crackers when it rains. Didn't know that. The Don Julio tequila kind of makes sense, right? When it's big, especially in Southern California, those big storms can last forever. Go get some tequila, some batteries in here. You know, maybe the flashlight needs battery stock up, but anyhow, you kind of get the point. This was the answer to our question that we had. And then maybe we can bring in another tool to ask a question and a whole different type of tool to do analysis. We can use an Amazon Alexa maybe to do our analysis. So I'd like to ask Alexa a question, and then I have a cloud-based instance of Nebo, and Alexa is going to send a query to Nebo and give me the answer. And I had to write a little custom function to do that, a little code to do that, but again, it was really easy, like 4 or 5 lines of code. I just used a library and pretended like it was a database. And this works about, you know, 75, 80% of the time. There's a lot of moving parts here. And I find I used to bring like a little Alexa and set her up and try to issue commands, but she would misunderstand me about half the time. So I have a little UI here where I can do this. And I'm going to turn the volume up on my computer. And this is essentially just another interface, an Alexa interface to query Nebo. And I'm going to put my microphone down here by my computer so you can hear. So we can start with Alexa, are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, ask Nebo what the top brands are when it's raining. So now she's doing that query. Takes a few seconds. Sometimes she leaves
The top 5 brands purchased while raining are Keebler Club, Cliff Luna, Sweet Baby Ray's, Don Julio, and Duracell Copper Top. And that's no bullshit.
Sometimes she has a mind of her own. But again, we've just seen 3 tools access this sort of centralized view that's geared towards the end users to go in and set up and use. So hopefully, with that UI, as you're in your Tableau analysis and new questions arise and questions that you couldn't predict, and you see results and you need to ask more questions that are from a different data set, or you want to use the data science tool to access the same data and do some predictive and then some visualizations. So maybe think of Nebo and how we can really centralize and allow that collaborative access across all data sources with all tools in a nice virtual environment, so it's nice and fast and easy, and hopefully you don't have to use too much IT to set up. So with that, I think we're just about through. I don't know how we do questions and answers, if there is any, but happy if you want to come up afterwards for questions if you have any, or drill into other parts of the product as well. Thank you all for coming out. All right.